Hello, welcome to Pastor's Library. My name is Stephen Redman, and this is the channel where we talk about everything to do with theology books, be they books that are maybe on a reading list for your seminary course, your bachelor's or master's degrees in biblical studies or theology, or whether you've just seen something somewhere that's piqued your interest, and we will try and help you and guide you through the very expensive process of owning books. So today I want to talk about something which has been inspired by my own personal pastoral view at the moment of it's coming up to Christmas. I'm recording this in the beginning of November, and I'm thinking about in our own church giving people some guidance for new books this year that might be interesting presents for Christmas, something like that. So I want today to talk about a new version of, well, I was going to say the Bible, but of the New Testament. And this is written by Scot McKnight, the eminent commentary writer. It's called the Second Testament. It's not even called the New Testament. The Second Testament is, if you like, the follow-up to the First Testament, written by John Goldingay, I believe, which has been out a couple of years, and Scot McKnight has followed it up with this straight from the Greek. Now, why another version of the Bible? Aren't there enough? Well, I am sure that if Solomon was still with us, he would be telling us that of the making of many versions of the Bible there is no end. But it is just a real issue in that in our changing language we get all of these tweaks and improvements to the Bible, and of course we should always remember that there is no such thing as the perfect translation or even the best translation. There is only other translations, and whereas there are some translations that are academically weaker than others, the majority of the modern translations have something to offer. But most of them are produced by teams of translators. And this is the work of one man. Now, you could say, well, it's a bit like Eugene Peterson's Message. Well, actually, Eugene was the main thrust of that, but he had a team of 4 people that he submitted every chapter to for comments and for changes. So it was sort of like a small team. Some of the really big versions, like the NIV and some of those sort of larger translations may have 90 or 100 people involved in the translation process. Some of them, maybe 12, 15, 20, but this is fundamentally one. Scot McKnight is, however, a fairly eminent guy. He's written 3 volumes of the New International Commentary on the New Testament, which off the top of my head are Colossians, Philemon and James. And they're all very good. He is also the New Testament editor for the Story of God commentary, of which he has written the commentary on the Sermon on the Mount. He obviously is the general editor of the rest of the New Testament. So we're not talking about a nobody here. I suppose what I'm saying is he's fairly creditable. I do read most of what he writes. But this is somewhat different to a Message or a New Living Translation or a New English translation or whatever version that you're into at the moment. This has been deliberately designed to make it a slower read. Now, in our busy world, where we're all running about like mad trying to complete the tasks that are before us, sometimes our time reading our Bibles can be rushed. Personally, I have many times got to the bottom of a page and thought to myself, hang on, I don't remember anything I've just read on that page. And of course, being reasonably well disciplined, I just make myself read it over and over again. In fact, there was one year when I set myself the task of reading every passage 5 times before I would move on. And I remember I ended up being stuck in Hebrews for about 3.5 months. And I always thought, I'm not sure that that's such a good thing, but I'll tell you what, I knew Hebrews really well at the end of that. So what's the difference about this? Well, Michael Bird has reviewed it. He said, Scot McKnight's translation of the New Testament takes us into the very world of Jesus and the apostles. It breathes the air of antiquity. Rather than try to make the New Testament too familiar, McKnight makes it sound foreign, like a distant land you are hearing about for the first time. Sounds a bit like Narnia, doesn't it? The Second Testament is a monumental literary achievement that will enrich and excite readers for generations. I think that's a good quote about anything. What he's done is he has changed the English, regular English names and place names to ones that more follow the Greek or would sound right to a first century hearer. I'm not very good at pronouncing those, so when I give you some examples, you might say, oh, but ultimately he started in that way. So when you start reading this, you think, hang on, where's that? Hang on, who's that? And it slows you down as you go through. Plus, some of the ways the Greek is phrased, he has kept in a way that most English translations would not keep them because they're not good English. Now, you might say, oh, that means it's really good. Well, it is good, and I think it is a good translation, but this is not something that flows off the tongue or that you can read quickly. This is something you have to spend a bit more time with. And I think if all it does is take you 10 minutes to read a chapter instead of 5, I think that's actually very helpful because it just gives you that little bit longer to think about the words. This, for example, is the beginning of Mark's Gospel. The Gospel's origin about Jesus Christos, God's royal son, just as it is written in Isaiah, the prophet, "Look, I commission my envoy before your face, who will prepare the path before you, a voice bellowing in the wilderness, get ready the way for the Lord, make his ways straight." That's similar enough to most English translations that you can follow it, but there are some things that make you just stop and think, why has he used the word bellowing? Now that's interesting, isn't it? To me, it just gives a slightly different sense to the sentence. It carries on and it talks about Johann the Dipper, which is John the Baptist, of course. And it talks about him putting on camel hairs and an animal skin waistband around his waist and eating locusts and wild syrup. Wild syrup? Sounds interesting. That's sort of a simple sampler to Mark. I'm going to give you some from John in just a moment. But just to say that this is a hardback book. It's got a nice, attractive purple sleeve cover and a matching hardback cover with pressing identifying it as a Second Testament. I think this is very nice. It's lightweight. It sells in England £23 to £30 a copy. All I can say is, for me, it's a refreshing thing. It's got brief introductions to each book, which some of them actually are quite interesting, even though they're brief. It's got a glossary at the back, and it also has monochromatic maps in with the text on pages where they're relevant to show the geographical context to the actual text that you're reading. And when I'm reading this, I'm thinking this is different to anything else I've read, but it has echoes of Peterson's message and echoes of the J.B. Phillips translation of the New Testament, which went back, I think, to the 60s. Little bit before my time, but still a worthwhile translation. If we read the Bible over and over, I think we develop an expectation of what's going to be on the page in front of us. I mean, I suppose I'm on my 50-something full read-through, which is something I do that daily, read through so many chapters a day, and then I've read the Bible in a year. And so I've done that, 50-odd times. And then I will study other sections of the Bible during the day. But if we do that, we sort of get a feeling for what's coming next. And I think McKnight has tried to derail that. He's tried to torpedo us so that we're not quite sure what's coming up. And he's trying to make us unhear the gospel that we are hearing, and he's trying to get us to hear it again in a different way for the first time. And that is not the ethos that's behind the NIV or the NLT or any of these modern translations. This is a different ethos altogether. And I think that if it does make us engage with the Bible more slowly and with more reason, then I think that is actually very helpful indeed. I'm just going to read to you a little bit from John's Gospel. In the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God. This one was in the beginning with God. All things were through him, and apart from him there was not one thing. What was in him was life, and the life was the light for humans. The light appears in the darkness, and the darkness did not prevail against it. You hear there the type of subtle differences in translation. He was the true light which enlightens every human, coming into the cosmos. He was in the cosmos, and the cosmos came through him, and the cosmos did not know him. Because I always like verse 14, the Logos became flesh and pitched a tent among us, and we observed his splendour, the splendour as from the only Son of the Father, full of grace and truth. Similar enough to most translations that we can get the sense of that, but subtly different. We go over to John chapter 3, a verse that you may have heard before, but maybe not like this. For God loved the cosmos in such a way that he gave his only Son, so everyone trusting in him may not be destroyed, but have eternal life. For God did not commission the Son into the cosmos, so he might judge the cosmos, but so the cosmos might be delivered through him. The one trusting in him isn't judged, and the one not trusting has already been judged, because the person has not trusted in the name of God's only Son. I was a bit put off when I first engaged with this version, and I thought, I bought it now, I'll have to push on through. And I pushed on through, and I was about halfway through Mark before I really got to the point where I thought, actually, I'm getting quite into this. And what I would say is, this is a great thing to buy as a Christmas present for someone you love, or someone who you feel would benefit from reading the scriptures a bit more slowly. And I think that this is, if you like, countercultural for our 21st century, where everything runs at double speed. I mean, I have a daughter who, whenever she watches YouTube, she switches up the audio speed to listen to it quicker so she gets through it more quickly. I just want to turn it back down and say, let me hear it at 1x speed, please. But we live in an age when everything is fast, and I think this may be something that could be quite refreshing for us. Acts chapter 2, when the day of Pentecost was filled up, they were all joined together. Unexpectedly, an echo came from heaven, like a strong rushing wind, and it filled out the whole house where they were sitting, and split tongues like fire appeared to them and sat on each one of them, and they were all filled with Holy Spirit. I like that. With Holy, not the Holy Spirit, with Holy Spirit. Quite like that. Here's one from Revelation, which is always a chapter. I always look at chapter 12 when I'm looking at any translation of the Bible. A great authenticating sign was seen in heaven. A woman having been wrapped with the sun and the moon under her feet, and a 12-star crown on her head, and having a child in the womb, she cries out, groaning in birth and being tormented to give birth. Another authenticating sign was seen in heaven. And look, a great fire-red sea dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his head 7 diadems. You can carry on. I just want to say to you, this is never going to be my main Bible. I am probably unlikely to preach from it. But for something to read for the rest of this year, I actually am really enjoying it. It's refreshing. It's helpful. And my congregation have at least heard about Johann the Dipper because I just find that hilarious. You know, this is a worthwhile addition to our many versions, and I hope that you may find it the same also. Whatever it is, find a Bible and read it. But this would be my recommendation for many people's Christmas boxes this year. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please give us a thumbs up on YouTube. Please subscribe. Please ring on the bell. It makes all the difference to us. And why not leave a comment below? I'll always try and send you a message back. But until next time, I just want to say bye.